And now, it's time for another episode of 20 Questions with your host, Peter Hazelwood.
Hello, today I'm over the moon to be joined by the game design legend that is Emerson Matsuuchi. Emerson is probably best known for his Century trilogy, that's Century Spice Road, Century Eastern Wonders, and Century A New World, but he's also designed other big hits, including one of my absolute favourites, Spectre Ops, which I can see on the shelf behind you, and Reef. So welcome, Emerson, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
It's a genuine pleasure. Okay, so here's the plan. I've got a total of 20 questions to ask you, and off we go, I guess. So the first one's a nice, easy one. Please tell us where you're based and what you do for a living.
Okay, I'm based in Long Island, New York, and I am a game designer.
Fantastic.
So that's now my full-time profession.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, I was going to ask about that because I was aware that there was another job that you used to do then.
Yeah, I was a software developer before.
Ah, fantastic. Okay. Oh, magnificent. Okay. That's the dream for many a game designer then, to get to the point where you can actually design full-time. Was that always your goal, or has it just kind of happened that way?
Oh, well, that's a really good question. I think that my initial plan was that I was going to be a software developer, and then when I retire, I was going to then design games to pass the time, because it's something I really enjoyed. But I think I've sort of fast-tracked that a bit.
Fantastic. Oh, I might have to scoot down to... I've got another question that's sort of relating to that, but I'll leave that for later. So I'll start with a nice easy one then. So what's your first memory of playing board games?
Oh, my first memory. Gosh. It was definitely a classic game. It was something like possibly Monopoly. But my first memory of playing board games wasn't my most fondest memories.
No.
So I didn't actually start to really enjoy board games until I started getting into some of the, I suppose, heavier games. So I think my first board game love was a game called Shogun, which I believe is now called, we went through several different names, Samurai Swords, and I think the current iteration is called Ikusa. So, but when you say the first one, I believe it was something like Monopoly. I distinctly remember like a roll and move style of game, maybe Chutes and Ladders, something like that was my first.
Oh, that's cool. Okay. All right. Well, then when did you get into modern board games?
I guess my story is very typical. It was Settlers of Catan that actually brought me into the world of modern board games. So, and it was from watching a Dice Tower review of it. So I saw a reviewer who was incredibly energetic, and I said, you know what, I got to give this a try. I could see he's very, very passionate about it. So I bought the game from a local game store, sat down, played with some friends, and immediately after we played that first game, we all looked at each other and says, well, let's play that again. And so I went down that rabbit hole. I believe maybe not the next day, but soon after, I went to the same game store and I bought Ticket to Ride and Carcassonne and looked for other games in that similar vein.
Oh, that's really funny. Last month I interviewed Richard Denning, and his story was, he was into wargaming and stuff, but his first other stuff was Catan. Yeah, I think a lot of people that's the case for. Okay, well, moving on to your designing then, which is more important to you in game design, theme or mechanics?
I'd have to say it's an equal part of both. My strengths lie in mechanics, I believe. Coming from a software development background, I appreciate the systems, and I see my strength as someone who can develop systems. And so I guess I'm leveraging my strength from my previous career, and I do see some overlaps. But that being said, though, deep down I consider myself more of an Ameritrash gamer. I love theme in my games, and I always try to inject theme and try to make theme either serve one of two purposes. One is to either immerse the players into the experience or to make the rules as intuitive as possible. So I don't like to make a game that is just strictly a series and interconnected mechanics, because that feels like it's more of a experiment than an actual product.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think lots of designers possibly one side or the other, but I think the absolute perfection is a designer who tries to accomplish both simultaneously, because, like you say, that perfect melding of mechanics and theme, yes, I could completely see that. So taking Spectre Ops for an example, it's got a nice small rule book. There's a few little edge cases like, I wonder if what if I want to do this, but in the main
Right.
it feels very intuitive, very thematic, and that's why it's one of my favorites, because I find it so tense. Apart from those occasional moments where, okay, the game's going really well for me, I'm in the driving seat, but that doesn't last long, I tend to find.
Yeah, I think that the perfect implementation of theme is when you do run into an edge case, but the players can figure out what the designer's intention was by just going to what is the most thematic answer to the question.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, brilliant. Okay. Well, then, how did you start designing games?
It's funny. As you called me, I have a spreadsheet open next to on the other side of the screen. And so most of my designs, I'm finding that I rely heavily on a spreadsheet for. So I know that's not the most exciting start of a game, but usually I'll come up with an idea and I'll try to jot it down, and I'll try to break down the concept, the idea, into numerical values and see how I could work with it. So it's not super glamorous, and I'm sure it's not the most interesting thing that people want to hear, is that, oh, how do you design a game? Oh, through a spreadsheet. That's probably the last thing people want to hear.
Well, it might not be a very glamorous answer, but I think it's a very illuminating answer, and I think lots of designers will answer this slightly differently. But I think there are plenty of designers who come up with an idea and better write it down, because if you don't write it down, then you might forget it.
Yes, yes. Actually, I have what I've been doing was I've been using Google Docs, because I can put it up on the cloud and I can always access it through my phone. I've converted my Word documents to Google Docs, just so that no matter where I am, as long as I have my phone with me, I can always jot down those ideas when they come.
Very, very sound idea. Okay, well, what tips would you give to anyone aspiring to be a games designer?
Hmm. Let's see. In the context of just pursuing it as a career?
I suppose I'm speaking more like, if somebody is trying to design a game, sort of, what would you advise to avoid certain pitfalls?
Okay. Well, one thing is to not design a game with the hopes of just getting it out there, because that's something I hear quite often, is that a game designer will say that, hey, I just want to get this game out into the world. I think you want to take the approach of putting yourself in the consumer's shoes. Like, what do they want from your game? And as long as you can think in their perspective, you'll come up with a product that is just going to be a lot more acceptable, a lot more. You'll create a product that's going to resonate with that crowd more by constantly keeping in mind what they want from your game.
That's a really interesting answer, because I suspect some people might say, well, start with what you know and what you love, and then you end up with a game that probably, as you say, won't appeal to a lot of people, or there'll be some issues with it in some way.
I guess it depends on how compatible your tastes are to the general audience and the particular market you're trying to hit.
Sure. Okay, brilliant. Oh, well, let's talk about what projects you've got in the pipeline, sort of what's coming next.
Okay. So let's see. We do have, in terms of releases, I think Foundations of Rome will be released this summer. That was kickstarted last January, I believe. So,
That sounds quite exciting.
yeah. Let's see, I do have some projects that I'm working with Plan B on, so expect some games from them. And I'm also working with another project with Arcane Wonders, who are the ones that did Foundations of Rome.
Fantastic.
So those are the things that are on my plate at the moment.
Okay, lovely. Okay, so this was the question I was alluding to earlier when you brought up, how you're now a full-time game designer. So I was going to ask you, have you found that achieving a certain level of success and popularity in the board game industry has affected your approach to game design?
I think it just gives me more pressure
Yes, and I was going to ask
more
that.
than anything else. But my approach to game design definitely has changed. It definitely has evolved. And in the beginning, when I was first designing a game, I was going more for um, the I was paying a lot more attention to like psychological payoffs and whether people were having fun. And I was constantly trying to chase after defining fun and trying to um, break down that concept. But it's the more I did that, the more I realized it is incredibly subjective and very individual. So every person's definition of fun is very, very different.
Mm.
So, but there are things that as I was going through this journey of trying to uncover what game design is. So I've always been trying to like break it down to an academic level of like what is good game design, what is poor game design, and there's no strict discipline that says one way or the other what is good or bad. But I've come to realize that many things in design, especially with mechanics, they're just really tools in a toolbox, and everything has situational uses. So, for instance, things that people have said are absolutely poor design choices, such as like player elimination. You know, it is one of those things that I see as a tool. And it may not be something that people enjoy, but it could be used in certain contexts. So, for instance, player elimination is a very harsh punishment when it comes to the interaction of like the mechanics. But it's also one of the things that elevate tension because it does heighten that feeling of loss, right?
Mm.
Uh, so there's a phenomenon called like loss aversion, where people just don't like to lose things. So to be able to tell them, well, you can't take a turn or you can't do this or that, to take things away has a stronger psychological effect than giving other players something.
Mm.
So there's lots of little tools that a game designer has at their disposal, and it's just really knowing what are the best tools to instill the experience that you want in the players. So I'm sorry, it was a super long,
That was a
long
lovely answer.
answer to a simple question.
No, fantastic. Okay, so I know some people in the States or Canada, but I'm interested to hear how COVID-19 has affected both personally and in your game designs, and whether it's impacted on your ability to work or design games.
Oh, it definitely has. I have not been able to play test with my gaming group, the usual gaming group, and that's been a big challenge. We've overcoming some of that with doing. We have some virtual options, some remote options for testing, and it's hard to get into like the facets of how the pandemic has affected, especially when you say on the personal level, without getting into like politics and things like that, especially here in the States. So it's been a very, very trying time, and I'm sure it has been all over the world.
I suspect so.
But,
Yeah.
but it's been especially partisan here in the States. Though it's definitely been a very, very political issue here. But um, so for me personally, it's definitely affected like the lifestyle. But in terms of like the game design, it's really just altered the process for me, and I think I have become much better. So one of the good things that came out of it is I think I'm much better at solo playtesting. So validating an idea before I even need to bring it to another playtester or another group, I can validate the ideas, and I've gotten being good at schizophrenia, where I'll just virtually just go around the table and just play as if I'm different players.
That's a useful skill in this day and age of yes, limited playtesting. Okay, wonderful. All right, what game would you recommend as an underrated gem? Maybe something that you think has flown under the radar somewhat.
Oh, okay. So, published or unpublished?
Well, I suppose if it hasn't been published, then people wouldn't expect to see it.
I see. Okay. So, published game that I enjoy. This is sort of my guilty pleasure game. Is a game called Panic Station.
Okay.
From uh, it's from I believe it's Stronghold Games that did this one. And I think it's a really really clever game. I know that it's gone through a couple iterations because I think the balance wasn't quite right with the initial set of rules, but even in its imbalanced form, it was always a game that I just had a ton of fun with. And I think that if you take it for what it is and treat it as a game where you're there to have fun, then I think a lot of people would really, really enjoy it. And I would love to see like a second edition with revamped rules for that game.
All right, well, I'll put that on the to-do list and...
Yes, let me know what you think of it.
Wonderful. Okay. What board game conventions have you been to and would recommend? Obviously, outside of pandemics.
Let's see. My usual convention circuit is typically Origins Game Fair. That's in Columbus, Ohio, and most of it's in the States. Gen Con is another big one, and I would only recommend that if you like the spectacle, if you like these big, grandiose type of conventions. So Gen Con, I've never been to Essen, but I've heard a lot of good things about it.
Yes, I've been once. I was going to ask whether you'd ever come over to any European conventions.
I have been to Modena Play, which is in Italy.
Okay.
So I've been to that one. But that was really the only one outside of the US that I've been to, though. So I'd love to go to Essen. I'd love to go to the UK Games Expo. The Tokyo Game Market. There's lots of places I'd like to visit. But if there's one that I would recommend is PAX Unplugged, which is usually later in the year. So it's a little bit after Essen, typically. Great. And that's in Philadelphia. So it's actually it's fairly close to me, but that's not the reason why I'm recommending it. I think it's an incredibly well-run show. It has the sort of like the size and the spectacle of Gen Con without feeling like it's incredibly overcrowded.
Wonderful. Speaking for myself and for your fans, I would say it'd be amazing to see you at the UK Games Expo one day. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I'd love to go there. So it's definitely something that I have on my radar. So hopefully in the next couple of years I'll make the trip out there.
Great. Okay, on to our quickfire round then. So just a few sort of simpler questions. Come up with the answer as quickly as you can. Okay.
All right.
Beer or wine?
Wine.
American football or soccer?
Soccer.
Favorite meal?
Ooh. Sushi.
Game you wished you'd designed?
Magic the Gathering.
Biggest achievement?
For my career, probably Century, the Century series.
Most interesting place you visited anywhere?
Oh, gosh. France.
Oh, that's interesting. One of my regular quickfire questions for so far I've only done it with British people is France or Spain. So I wasn't expecting France.
Oh yes. So I actually did. It was almost 2 weeks, I think. Yeah. So we spent close to 2 weeks in France and this was to go around to promote the Century series. So it was actually paid for by Plan B, and it was a fantastic experience. I still need to work on my French, but I hope the next time I go there, I'll be able to get around without needing Martin, who is the person that went with me from Plan B, without him having to constantly translate for me.
Sure. Oh, fantastic. Okay. Well, by my reckoning, we're on to our last question then. So that's the quickfire round done. Who do you think I should ask to come on to 20 questions?
Have you hit up Eric Lang yet?
No, I have not.
Okay. How about Ignacy Trevicek from Portal Games?
I mean, yeah, I've heard of Eric Lang, but yes, yes, and Ignacy, yes, yeah. Whether they would be interested in appearing on it is another question, but they would be very interesting people to have on. I can't disagree with that.
Yes, there's also Jerry Hawthorne and Isaac Vega. They're phenomenal game designers when it comes to like more story-driven, heavy narrative games. Can't think of better designers in that field.
Nice. Okay. Oh, now we're getting the funny screen resizing. Why is it doing that?
I answered it incorrectly, apparently.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, that's... Yeah, and then it does that. Oh, brilliant. Okay. Dear me. One day I shall get the hang of this technology and we shall be very happy. Fantastic. Okay, well, I'd like to say a massive thank you to, oh dear, Emerson Matsuuchi. Not thank you to the technology for doing this right to the end. Fantastic. But yes, I really appreciate you giving up your precious time to do this little interview. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Fantastic. Okay. Until next time then, goodbye.
You've been watching Board Game Hub. Please remember to like and subscribe if you like the content. Until next time, farewell.